All right. I have Mike Weiksner on. Mike, I'm excited to chat with you, learn more what you're working on. You've have been building Pocketful of Quarters, or POQ, since 2018, I believe. When you started the project or the company, what was the initial impetus? What was the problem you were initially trying to solve in the world?
Well, it's kind of a crazy thing. Actually, we started in 2017. So I was driving my son when he was 11 years old home from school, and I explained to him how Bitcoin worked. I was investing in blockchain and cryptocurrency, and he said that his biggest problem was that he was leaving Madden, and why couldn't he get credit for his time, effort, and coins when he wanted to switch to Fortnite? And I said, that's kind of interesting. When I was growing up, went to the arcade, you could just use quarters in all the arcade. Like, I don't really know why video games, have to be, every game has to have its own currency. And so he came up with the idea, of an arcade token on the blockchain. And I was still investing in companies. And so it was kind of a side project. I took him to a meetup in early 2018. And he just went viral. Like, they took a little video of him talking about his idea, and Tim Draper reached out and invested, and the original game designer for Medal of Honor and Call of Duty, and the head of a game studio at THQ and Nexon reached out and said he saw the same problem in the video game industry. And so it just sort of, I've never seen anything like that in all my time as a investor and an entrepreneur, where there's just such electricity around.
So what was the video of? It was your son doing what?
Oh, they were just interviewing him and asking him, like there was a meetup, and they just were interviewing people. They were like, "Why'd you come to the meetup?" And he's like, "Well, I got this idea," and they're like, "Wow, that's kind of cool." And he was on, they got invited on morning TV shows, and he's just a natural. He would say, "Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old," and he was 11 going on 12, and he could tell everybody everything about cryptocurrency and my project. And so ended up being like a keynote speaker with Joe Lubin and others, in the crypto circuit.
Wow. And it was just from going to a meetup and talking about the idea, and it wasn't even a project that he had built. It was just an idea that he had.
Well, we'd been doing a little bit on the side together, trying to teach him how to program. And another crazy part about the whole thing is when that happened, then we decided to hire an engineer to help us. And I recruited Janty Kanani, who went on to found Polygon. He was our first engineer, and in fact, partially was inspired for Polygon by all of the transactions and things that started to happen on our platform, and imagining, how Ethereum would never be able to support what we were.
That's pretty epic. So did your son take this and is now working with you on it, or is he just finishing school?
Yeah, no, he's back. So it was kind of interesting. So he was like a little bit of a media darling and the conference darling for like a little while. And he said, Dad, I don't care about cryptocurrency. I care about video games. And so he decided that and then he discovered girls in sports, and he took a little bit of a break, but he's actually getting, back involved in it. And it's really interesting. He's gone and he's spoken at a couple of events, and, we'll get into this a little bit more, but, the original thing is this problem that he has, but now, what do you want? He has ideas about how to create a DAO in order to empower everybody to get involved, to make the virtual world what we want to live in, in the future, and take it back from, the oligarchs like Mark Zuckerberg and the big game publishers that are sort of, making the virtual world for their own benefit. So he's now getting back involved after, a 3-year
what would I search? I want to include this in the show notes. What would I search for to find this video?
I'll send you the link. There's a YouTube of a 7-minute. Yeah. There's a bunch of them, but he won Meet the Drapers, and he pitches Tim Draper, and there's some awesome moments, and then there's a bunch of different YouTube videos from that time.
Conceptually, what do you think it is about the idea of having a currency that integrates into multiple games? Is that so important? Because because people play multiple games and you want to have a record of your progress across games. I've heard this idea get thrown out in different formations, but what do you think people ultimately, what's the end state of this? What are we building towards, do you think, as an industry?
Yeah, so I mean, interoperability is, what's happened is, we've had in video games, we had a free to play. And free to play in the beginning was an amazing, great experience for players, because what you used to have to pay $40 or whatever to buy a game, and now there was hundreds of thousands or millions of games being launched that were all free. And so that was like a bonanza. It was like great. But what happened is that turned into massive fragmentation. And as the industry's developed, what's happened is that, the typical experience of a player is you download a game, you play for 30 seconds, and then you're bombarded by ads and paywalls. And there's no escaping it. It's terrible. And it's what people want is more like an arcade. When you go and, I was like thinking about this, it's like, as a parent, like, every time, like my younger son came up to me and said, I want to spend 99 cents to buy a green egg. And I'm like, in a dragon egg. I'm like, no way, this game is trying to crush you. You can't do that. But yet I could take him and his friends, to Dave and Buster's, and I'll pay $20 for them to run around and play arcades for an hour. And when they're doing that, they're not worried like, oh, this game costs 50 cents, whatever. They just look shiny, cool, play one time. If it's fun, maybe play two more times. If it's not fun, move to the next game. And so that's, that arcade spirit where, you're respecting your time. In fact, you have more fun playing the same game in the arcade, setting the high score, competing for the high score against the other people in the arcade, compared to, being able to play a free to play game, by yourself. It's just I think that experience is just massively better. And as we enter the metaverse, it just becomes increasingly important. Like, we have to respect people's time. We have to, and also, which means allowing them to pay for better and greater, experience.
Do you almost see it as a almost like a single auth sign on, where I'm thinking about every app and website I want to use asks for my email, maybe my phone number, my password to log in. And ultimately, they just want to be able to record who I am as a unique person and have a way to contact me. And so Facebook and Google and Apple all have developed the click one button and log in with this website. And I think of that as being a decrease in onboarding friction for every single website out there, given that they don't need to own that. They're happily to outsource that if they can get better conversion on signups. And then I think about this in your case, or in the case of gaming, where there's a high barrier to friction to get a consumer or a player to pay the game. Like, I have to, if I had to put in my credit card, that would be a huge deal. But with Apple Pay, it makes it easier. If there's in-app purchases that's already connected to my credit card, it's easier. But I think of this as like decreasing the payment threshold. Is that kind of the benefit that you see of interoperability? Is when you go to the arcade, you just throw the quarter in, it's super easy. But we don't have that equivalent in the digital world.
Yeah, exactly. It's micropayments, right? That's and it is about, and I'd say it even goes beyond that. So that's the beginning of it. The beginning of it is that it's reducing this friction that you're talking about. But there's two additional extensions beyond all of the things, the benefits that you said. The second extension, the first extension is that it's different than cash games. Like, all video games have a micropayment layer. Like, even when you think back to the day, like Pac-Man, like, you didn't really pay a quarter to play a game. You put a quarter in and you got a credit. If you put in 4 quarters, you got 6 credits. So they were breaking the notion of like a direct cash. And then at the end of the game, if you lose, they do a random little flipper. And if you match your last digit, you get a free credit. And so it's incredibly important for making games fun is to disassociate the payment from the way the actual consumption of the entertainment. So that's a really like a radical thing that I think everybody misses. If you think, Mark Zuckerberg has made 2 giant missed swings at this, where, he launched Facebook credits and it's a payment mechanism. And everybody thinks like the metaverse, people are going to use real money. And yes, they're going to buy arcade tokens with real money. Like real money is going to exist, but the video game portion is going to be like a microtransaction system, partly for reducing friction, like you said, but also just because it makes it inherently more. It's the native currency for the metaverse. And then the second part about this native currency of the metaverse is the other thing about the metaverse is it's going to be social. And so one of the big problems in games today is people want to play multiplayer games. If I invite you to the game and they all have different currencies, I'm effectively schlocking this game and making you buy $20 worth of currency in this game to play with me. And that's a big barrier. People don't want to do that. So what started off as a single player problem, for my son is really a multiplayer problem. Now people are stuck in Fortnite. If you carry the story forward, he loved Fortnite in the beginning, but now people are on Fortnite, but it's really hard for the beginning of Fortnite was like really magical because it wasn't just diehard players. It was like everybody was on Fortnite. And it's really difficult to get that kind of experience now because of the business models, the way that they are, because it's so hard to sort of convince people to come and play another game because of the business model.
Do you think that the business model of Web3, I'm picturing when you describe these new video games that are yet to be built and in progress of being built, they're utilizing the same core technology up front, but behind the scenes, they might have different payment integrations using crypto. I interviewed one guy and he gave me an interesting perspective. Yeah. He was deep into gaming and he said that that these companies that build the games, they don't have an incredible incentive to integrate cryptocurrency because their database is fast. It works really well. It's not getting hacked into. So, and they can easily maintain their own ledger of coins or tokens or whatever they have. Mm-hmm. And there seems to be a disincentive to allow you to leave the game and like send money to another game if it's not made by the same company, because it'd just be like if I can share my Twitter followers with Facebook or to Google or something. How do you see that as a major obstacle, even in the future with business models? And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, that's the dinosaur view, and it has some basis in reality because this business model is serving video games relatively well today, but it's incredibly anti-player. Like the way you described it, it's like, imagine you've got subscription businesses that are based on breakage. So like the best customers we have, it's like a gym, like the best customers we have are people who subscribe and don't go, right? It's like the best customers we have are people who buy the currency and then they have to leave the game and abandon their stuff, right? Like, I mean, yeah, fine. If you can get away with it, it's a fine business. But it's really holding the video game business back. And so there was a similar debate with free to play. Like people were like, why should I pay millions of dollars to get the Spider-Man IP and then launch a game for free on Apple, right? Well, why? Well, because it's the cheapest form of marketing. Like you can make money other ways, but you're going to reach a huge audience if you've got the right IP that people want. And so it's the same thing for video games. Which is that, why do you let it, or, Zappos is another example, like free returns, like, because that was the barrier for getting people to buy clothes online. And so it's like the next generation is like, why do you let people, take their coins out with them? It's because that's the easiest way to get them to come in once they realize that they're not going to get trapped. And ultimately, just like free to play, this, getting over this hang up in the video game industry is going to make the industry orders of magnitude bigger than it is today, right? It's a $200 billion business, but the metaverse is going to be $10 trillion or more. Like it's, and so just like in free to play, like the console games and others that have the old models, they are still growing. They're just not really that relevant because 3/4 of the market is free to play. So I think free to play and console games will continue to grow as they do, but this thing is just going to be a massive behemoth in the next 5 years that'll just dwarf everything else. And so there isn't like a comeuppance. It's not like disruptive, like, EA is going to go out of business. It's just where
do you see the line there? But certainly on the EA side or Riot Games, the line is the games that they make. So any games that they don't make is not part of Riot Games or EA. Where do you see do you think of Metaverse Gaming as games that are hosted in the cloud, computationally either run in the cloud or downloaded on your computer if there's no console, or could they run on a console like PlayStation or Xbox? how do you, and who would make them? Would they be made by large companies or some other way?
I define, the metaverse is the set of interoperable games. So like right now, everything is like fragmented. And so like, I think it's really different from what like a lot of other people think. It's not about VR. It's really the futures here is just unevenly distributed. And so what we're doing is allowing like constellations of games to just quickly form and become interoperable with each other. And so this era of consolidation that we're going to have in the next 5 years is going to be everyone forming co-ops, around them. There'll be giant video game companies that do that within their own ecosystems. There'll be smaller companies and game developers that band together. And then ultimately they're going to have to make truces amongst themselves to allow people to go, between them. And then from 5 years from now, that will be the metaverse. It'll be a bunch of these different universes where there is friction going between them, but we can talk about leaving EA and going to Quarters and then going, to Unreal or something, and so that will be that will
and when
be
you say the future's here, it's just unevenly distributed. Are there examples of games that come to mind today that are doing this, or multiple games together that are making? Yeah, that's a good example. And by example, what are they doing specifically? They're allowing you to move between Roblox and
Roblox is, and it goes to your other question as well. Roblox is interesting. It's one app, one game engine, one currency. The reason it works so that streamers and other people can take their audiences and switch around between games is because everybody has Robux. Parents are happy, just like in the arcade that I was telling you before, to give their kids $20 in allowance to spend in Robux. And if they buy a green egg or whatever, they realize that this is like capped. Like you can do what you want, but it's just $20, right? And so they're already getting that. Now, the problem is that it's one app and one game engine, so it's got these blocky games. And if you're a game developer, you can't do a cool VR game, and you can only publish it into their app. And so like it's really, really limiting. But I mean, like the dynamics are interesting. Like the average Roblox player is 300 times better lifetime value than a free to play game, like a typical free to play game. And it's 13 and under kids, right? And again, this is about the additive. Like they cracked the nut for like, how are you going to monetize kids, right? You're not really going to give them ads. And if you did that, nobody wants ad, send them ads. It's illegal. Like they cracked this nut, and it created a whole new market. Like they're not really stealing from other game developers that we're targeting older, paying. Do
you see that as being specific? That business model as being specifically uniquely applicable to under 13, where you can't show ads, so in order to monetize, you charge the parents and give the kids credits to spend in the app, or
no? I think it's resetting expectations. The kids that grew up with Roblox are going to go to the free to play, and they're going to be like, "What? This is crazy!" Just like my son, he's like, these business models don't make any sense. And then the rest of us were like, "Oh well, these suits have these good reasons for doing it." And he's like, "Well, screw that, man. That sucks for me. Like that doesn't make any sense. Let's fix that, right?" And like now there's just a whole generation of people that expect more. The only difference is when they outgrow Roblox, they want to have 3D awesome freaking graphics, and they want to like they want both. They're like, why do I have to give up the one currency to get the 3D stuff? I just want it all. And of course, we're going to give it to them, and that's going to make the
all right. So I'm with you. What is when you say free to play? Is that games on your iPhone, Android, web? Basically just with the concept of it's free to start, but then we're going to show you ads or charge you money to up level in some way. Is it agnostic to the platform?
Yeah, so it is agnostic, but it's dominated by mobile, and I think that's the thing. And we had a little bit of a resurgence with games and consoles and PCs and stuff like that because of the pandemic, but it's going back to mobile, and there's a really interesting opportunity. And you see it again, the future's here unevenly distributed in some Asian countries and whatever, like multiplayer mobile, like whatever is the thing, right? We don't quite have that here in the United States, partly because of these barriers. It's impossible to market a multiplayer mobile game other than like giant $100 million shock and awe kind of campaign, which is really risky and very few people can do it. But that is that's one of the things that like Quarters and these interoperable arcade tokens, it's gonna, I think that's one of the main things. It's gonna be multiplayer mobile games, even games that you only play for a little bit and then you give it up and you come back in 9 months and you play a little bit more. And just like with mobile apps, like, you just cycle through them. It's not everything has to be Clash of Clans, which is like the exception that proves a rule. I mean, that's, that's an awesome game.
When you say Clash of Clans, by example, that's the category of games that represent people who tend to be all consuming. So if I'm playing Clash of Clans, I'm doing Clash of Clans only. Like I'm going deep in it, as opposed to having 7 or 8 different apps and games on my phone where I just move around between them. Is that?
I think people playing Clash of Clans play multiple games. It's because it's multiplayer mobile. That's the thing. That's the part that I think is the most interesting part of it.
So you guys have raised $7 million, is that right? In funding?
We haven't.
I just saw it online on Crunchbase.
We've raised.
That's where I got that from.
No, I don't know.
Dude, it's beyond me. I don't know. But have you guys? Where are you guys now in terms of team size? LinkedIn has you around 25 people. Does that sound about right? Some round of VC funding.
Yeah, we're a little bigger than that. Yeah. We're over 30 people. It's kind of funny actually, because my COO, runs the business side of stuff, and he's hiring like crazy, and we're hiring like crazy on the tech side. And so I don't think there is a single person who actually knows exactly how many people work at the company, because like I was on a conference call, I'm like, oh wait, there's like a new person I never knew about on the call. Yeah, no. So we're in a rapidly growing phase. So the big news on our front is that on May 10th we're launching our cryptocurrency called our governance token called Q2. So that's our big thing.
All right, Mr. Mike. Pardon that brief interruption. So we were talking about where you guys are in a company, token launch. Let me start with, why build the token, and what do you hope the token will do for game developers and players?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole idea is that we're going to live the majority of our attention in life is moving into the virtual worlds. And today it's controlled, as I said, by a small number of oligarchs. And the purpose of having a token is to take back our virtual future and give the control to players and creators. And, the token distribution goes to the people who are going to build that, and then gives them the ability to have a say in what investments they want to have. Do they want some next version of a cool game they're playing? How does that compare to investing in goggles, like which is what Mark Zuckerberg thinks that we want? That everyone gets to decide. And ultimately what that does is it makes this future come faster and larger and better than it otherwise would. So I think having a cryptocurrency launch is really essential, at this time, which, because this is happening fast and furious with lots of people, with different ideas about how it should play out.
And is your view that Pocketful of Quarters, or POC token,
POQ, Q2?
Sorry, POQ, POQ. I like that. We just POQ. Would that be the currency that goes between other currencies in games? So if I have like you said, a credit system in a game, or some way of tracking however the game wants to do that, would there then be like a conversion to POQ in order to port that over to a new game?
Yeah. So it's the arcade token you buy with stable tokens for a fixed price, flexible supply. So that's just like in arcades, like you can buy $100 or $1,000 worth of arcade tokens. The money's in escrow, and then when you play games, the developers can exchange it and get the money out for providing the entertainment. But 15% of the sale of the token of Quarters goes to buy and burn the Q2s. In other words, it's distributing the revenue to to the investors of the Q2 token. So it's so that it really is like a governance and investment token, so that you can participate in deciding what the future should be, and then making good decisions. You'll participate financially and how big and how much revenue is distributed to investors.
Let me break this down a little bit to make sure I understand this. So the launch will be, bam, there's 1 million tokens. Do you think of it as an initial launch where there's airdrops and tokens are distributed to a number of different people? So that happens. Then there is a initial allocation for investors that have invested in POQ as a company. That would be like your shares or investor shares. Is that right? The way to think about that?
Yeah, so there's, just to be clear, there's 2 tokens. The Quartus token is launched and is being used by millions of people today. The new launch is for the Q2 token. And then now within the Q2 token, you're right, we've got a Medium post that, describes how the tokenomics and how we're going to, distribute it to, to streamers, players, game developers, and investors.
How did you make that decision on tokenomics? I'm always fascinated by founders and how you came up with the decisions you made. Was it a straightforward process when you sat down and thought about the different economics or incentive systems, or was there particularly difficult aspects of the tokenomic design that you found that just took a lot longer to research and come up with decisions?
Yeah, it's been a very deliberate process to come up with it. So, we could have launched, and really George and my COO, my son George, and our COO Tim has been very frustrated by this, because like in 2017 it seemed like a good time to launch a token, but we didn't have the answers to some of these questions then. Actually, the most important question was, how can you do it in a regulatory compliant way? And so a lot of what's important about the ecosystem that we're creating is fun, safe, and interoperable, that we've been a leader in thinking through regulatory issues. And so we have the first and only no action letter from the SEC clearing our K token to be sold as a consumer product and not as a security. And that's really, really important for getting the video game companies to adopt it. But we had to slow down because it's not clear when you launch a cryptocurrency, how can you do that in a safe and compliant way? And we have a patent pending technology for using SMS to allow people to prove what geography they live in. And unfortunately, that means we have to exclude U.S. People from participating in the token launch. But we can. Oh. Yeah. So, but we can become decentralized, and eventually everybody in the world, including people in the United States, will be able to participate. Just not in the beginning. That's, it's unfortunate. Like I think that there's a lot of lessons from cryptocurrency. The regulators are behind, but it's the world that we live in, and our mission is to create to change the virtual world in the future. And this is a path. This is a legal, regulatory compliant path that's available to us while the regulators sort out their issues.
Is it a matter of the SEC having some precedent for what you're trying to do is illegal, or is it just too unclear? What specifically is the reason why you can't launch in the U.S.?
It's like literally like the definition of a security. So it's, is the value of an investment related to a common promoter? And so the gray area is, at what point are you decentralized enough? So we are a decentralized currency, and this DAO that we're creating is decentralized. The safest thing to do is to push off that day of reckoning with the SEC and other regulators and make it, continue to do the things that we've been doing to make it truly, decentralized. So that's the rub. And people take different choices. I mean, there are actually some of the like super diehard crypto people sort of, thumb their nose at our no action letter. They said, look, this is not helpful. Like we need, everything's decentralized and don't worry about it, and just, YOLO, do what you want to do. And people make different choices. That's obviously not the choice that we made, but that's really the question is like, can you become decentralized enough? And so by doing it this way, we'll have streamers, developers, investors, players, all really having true control. And at that point, there's no, I think everyone, including regulators, will agree that it's compliant. Easily agree.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like a path forward for U.S. regulators to see that it's useful to have people in other countries. But man, it bites though, because it's like people in the U.S. We're losing ground, right? We're not the first ones to launch. We're not the first ones to adopt it. It's like, now's the freaking time, guys, like to make this stuff clear and logical. Have they taken any steps to, you mentioned the no action letter. The no action letter refers to a question you asked them, which was, is the Q2 token a security?
No, it's about quarters. I want to be super clear about that.
Okay.
And so, so if you want to dive into this a little bit, it's kind of an interesting thing. So the SEC, they are cops. So imagine you're going to have a party at your house and you don't want to get busted by the cops. Like, the cops are not in the business of like giving you a letter saying you can have a party, we're not going to bust you. So a no action letter, that's what a no action letter is. Well, why would a cop ever issue a letter like that? Well, the answer is the only reason why they want to do it is in order to create models for people to have compliant parties. And so they say, you have to hire people to drive the cars, and you have to, make the noise go off at 11 o'clock. And like, so what they one person can go through and sort of say, here's how I'm going to have my party. And they'll say, if you do it this way, you're okay. And it's not just for us, it could be for anybody, but they want to get out there a real company that's doing something which can give guidance to other people about how to do it in a regulatory compliant way. And this is why some people in the industry are a little bit unhappy, because just because what we're doing is compliant doesn't mean other more aggressive things aren't compliant, but it's a really, really safe thing. It's sort of like if you only have 8 people at your party and people go home by 8 o'clock at night and you don't serve drinks, this is compliant. Like that's kind of like, oh, that's like awesome, but like, who cares, right? That's a little bit of like, the debate that's going on there. Of course, we think it's really important because this is all that is necessary to get billions of people onto the blockchain. So like, let other people fight about other stuff. Like, we got our ticket, let's go.
Yeah. It's really not productive and emotionally frustrating, I feel, to compare the current state of affairs to the ideal world. Because when you do that, you just immediately get down and you feel like just disappointed in the future, saying like, oh, we should already have the regulatory system that is now perfectly set up. There shouldn't be any friction. It's like, whether it's healthcare or the financial sector or the transportation sector or the political sector, whatever sector it is, it's like, it's going to be imperfect and it's going to require a lot of work to change people's minds and then to change the operations and infrastructure of these systems. But it's like, that's what evolution is. That's how you grow. So to your point, throw the party at 8, don't serve alcohol, and move the ball forward. When you say throw the party that closes at 8 and don't serve alcohol, what's the technical understanding of what you mean by that for Quarters to have this no action response from the SEC on their the security statement?
The key thing is the innovation that we had by putting transfer controls into the contract. So like all other arcade tokens, first of all, you can buy, every time you buy it, you can buy, it's a stable price. You can always buy more at the same price. You can buy as much as you want. But then when you have those tokens, you can't transfer them to other players. So you can't use it to buy drugs or anything else. You can only use it in approved by developers,
right.
Approved developers that are providing entertainment. That's like defined, as something which we recognize as a consumptive thing. And then only those people are then allowed to get the money out of the escrow. And so the game developers can accept and give quarters. Players can't send it between each other. And these restrictions and the controls that we put around them are what, why the SEC was like, and it's an existing system that already plugs into games. So we're not like, building the system with, by pre-selling the quarters. So like that, all of that was like a really safe bundle. That's the 8 people leaving at 8 with no drinking.
Mm. Yeah. Do you draw an analogy to how casinos work? You go to a casino, you buy the chips, and you play with the chips at whatever table you go to. The chips are useless if I go to. I mean, if you're in Vegas, people probably would accept chips at like a restaurant, but but practically speaking, they're not useful currency for anything. Is that how Quartus is designed effectively?
Yeah, I think that's pretty close, and that's a really interesting analogy because also if you dig into the technology aspect of it, it's kind of part of our model of like how the scaling. I told you Jayant Kanani, was our original engineer, and like the idea is basically that you need to watch the cage where you buy and sell chips very carefully. But when people are running around the casino, if they drop a token in the toilet or tip a waitress or whatever with a casino chip, it's like that's a lower stake thing, right? And so, I think now for 5 years we've been thinking about this as like the layer two, solution is going to be the transfer of these chips. Like that doesn't really matter, and there's a lot of cool things with like zero knowledge proofs where we can do things where you were talking in the beginning about some of the concerns that game developers have, which is really true. Like your game needs to know that your transactions were okay. My game needs to know that my transactions were okay. But a player like Jennifer, she needs to be able to see that the transactions in both of our games, but only hers. And so how can you selectively share that? And zero knowledge proofs can do that. So in addition to there being cheaper and faster, and all of these things can be done if you do it that way. But ultimately, when you settle up and now you want to get paid and pay your team for building the game and so on and so forth, then that has to be on the layer one. That part of the contract has to be executed there because now you're taking money out of the escrow. It's out, it's gone, and you can do whatever you want with it. Like once it's once it's out. And so that model also drives how we think about the tech platform that we're building.
And effectively, the Quarters token has been the focus for your company for the last X number of years. And then when you went to when you think about growth, has growth traditionally been getting game developers to integrate the token into the games? Is that kind of the business focus?
Yeah, so we started off actually by hosting third-party tournaments, meaning that like you use Quarters as like a ticket, and then you can play competitive games, and then it's also a prizing token, and that's great. We've become a community partner for Epic, Fortnite, and other games, and so and that's great because we're creating a marketplace between players and games, and so the game developers, like a classic marketplace, the game developers want to be where the paying players are, and the paying players want to be where the great games are, right? Mm-hmm. How do you get that jump started? And so, today people want to play Fortnite, tomorrow they're going to want to play something else, but we're attracting all of the, the top Fortnite players in the world onto our platform by hosting the best tournaments. And that's a much lower lift to become a community partner for Epic than it is to have them replace V-Bucks with Quarters, right? So, that's like the first step, and then the second step, and this is where the magic with the Roblox stuff starts happening. It's where we are today, where we're bringing on dozens and soon hundreds of game developers on the platform to have native integration. Because I think that's far and away a better experience than just running third-party tournaments.
And the third-party tournaments would be that you play the game and then you get rewarded in the token Quarters outside of the game. It's just like you play this tournament, you win, and then you get Quarters.
That's right, and then you can go to the prize store and you can get V-Bucks, a gift card that you can go buy skin in the game. So the loop is almost there. The only thing you can't do is exchange skins and things for Quarters. There's no or buy Quarters in Fortnite, but you can go from Quarters to V-Bucks, but you can't return.
I see. How did you know you needed to make another token? I mean, clearly having one would be nice, but you said, hey, we want to have Q2. Was this obvious from the get-go? Was there a moment when you realized, oh, we need to rethink this or make a completely new token? How was that process?
That was from early 2018. There was always a 2-token model. I mean, if you think back to that time, like the stable coins didn't exist. Like Quarters is the original stable token. And so there has to be a cryptocurrency, and the cryptocurrency, as I was saying, you were asking about George, the quarter solves the immediate problem, but the Q2s is about solving the meta problem, like, wrestling control overall, like not just a point, so, even an important point solution. So it's always been part of the idea. I would say there's been one major shift in that, which is we started off because we wanted to make this easy to understand. We would distribute the revenue, the 15% was originally as royalties. But the strong feedback was to distribute it, in the buy and burn model, which is a lot more efficient in a lot of ways. And the second thing that changed, with a smart contract, was developers and everybody gave strong feedback. They wanted to get paid in stable tokens. They wanted to get they wanted to understand how they get paid. And we had some complexities, like in the way that we were paying out developers, that I maybe over time they're going to turn out, to be necessary, but they were getting in the way of, adoption. So we simplified that. It's more close to the Roblox model, except we're paying out, more than double what Roblox pays out to developers.
Is that because Roblox takes a portion of it for their company proceeds, or why? How do you have the extra margin to do that?
Well, so I mean, the immediate answer is exactly what you're saying. Like, Roblox keeps 70%. I mean, look, we're both doing something similar, which is like we're marketing a token for an arcade. So we're collecting the players and getting them to pay, right? So that's huge value to the participants. We're doing something very different than Roblox, which is they need to pay. The company, in addition to just wanting profits, they need to keep on investing and maintaining the game engine that they have. So it's extraordinarily expensive to do that. And so that's what they're doing. Instead, what we do is we say, bring your own engine, pick whatever game engine you want. And so it creates a lot more variety in terms of where you can play and what kinds of games you can make, but we don't have that cost. It's, we're not trying to compete on the game engine side.
Yeah. And the games should have enough money coming in from the people playing the games that are paying through the Q2 token. Is that right? Is that the right way to think about it? They're spending the Q2 token?
They pay directly. So it's paying players, people who bought the quarters. The Q2 tokens are beneficiaries of what's going on in the ecosystem, and the money that we're raising is going to help catalyze, the system. We'll incentivize, games, and we already are doing this with our partners to bring them on. So, it's not just if you build it, they will come, but, we can have some really great games because, we can basically share, like, this starts to answer the question, like, why should EA join a POQ? Well, the answer is, if we give them 5% of our tokens or something like that, then they own a piece of the future of video games in exchange for bringing something that players really, really want. Like, getting EA to participate in a shared ecosystem would be a massive win for players, right? So, that's a little bit pie in the sky. I'm just giving it as a for example, but that's how we can leverage Q2s in order to make everybody happy, and ultimately that would make EA more money, and players would be able to have better experiences.
So this podcast is released after you've launched the Q2 token. With that being said, is there any game companies that are notable that are bought into this? Would you call it like a token launch sale? So initial, it's not an ICO, right? Or would it be? Would you consider an ICO?
A token generating event, yeah.
Token generating event,
yeah. So, there's another announcement that I can't make, but yes, there's.
Stay tuned.
We have. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. On that we have some exciting news. Yeah.
Sweet. So I think I wrapped my head around the quarters launch. Did you want to add something?
No. I was going to say, and I did mention that we're community partners with Epic, and we have over 100 games that are doing tournaments, and we also have several dozen games that have, smaller independent games that have the token directly integrated. I'll shout out one of them in particular called Stream Arenas because it's a really cool implementation. So what Stream Arenas is a game that you can play in Twitch, in the chat. So you issue commands. And so one of the things you could do is you can put a bounty on, let's say, I put a bounty on your head, 400 quarters. And now Jennifer comes and she kills you in the game just by like typing commands. And then she'll get 400 quarters and an NFT trophy to commemorate the accomplishment. And like all of the quarters that I had to pony up to get the bounty and everything is all like just handled through Twitch chat. So, and it's obviously, it's a cool game, popular with streamers, kind of like it's a shared screen, right? Because like we're all looking at the same, the same thing playing together, compared to, let's say, Fortnite, we're playing together, but we all have our own first person, views in Fortnite. So and it has some clever dynamics, like these social dynamics about this, the Quartus is not just a game token, but a social game token.
Man, so what do you think about this from a meta perspective? Where do you think we're going as a society here? Do you see this as you ever seen the movie Matrix? You must have. Yeah. Do you see this as that by analogy there, where we're moving our conscious minds into a space where there's always you can be in different games, but there are different universes effectively, where they have different rules of gravity and they look different and they have different objectives. They're designed entirely different. Do you see this as being what humans are destined to do in a sense? Like Ready Player One is, we have the outside world, which is kind of dilapidated and crumbling down, but inside these games, it's incredible. And this is all we care about. Wait, how do you see it from a 50,000, 100,000 foot level?
Yeah, I look at, there is a competition between screens and reality, and the screens are taking massive share. And I think we're only about 12 to 18 months away from where the typical person on the globe spends more time in front of screens than in the real world. That's a pretty interesting moment in history. Now, some of these fantasy things in terms of like the immersiveness of the experience and things like that, obviously that's not happening for a majority of people, majority of the time in 12 months. It's cell phones, it's the computer screen, but mostly cell phones that are dominating, people's times. And so I think that's why people are excited about AR first before VR, because I mean, I would say that like playing Candy Crush in the back of the bus is a little bit of actually an AR experience. I mean, you're in the real world, but you're mostly focused on what's happening, in your game. So I think, in the 5-year time frame, that's like a little bit more like where it is now. You want to extrapolate, a bit farther. I think that the virtual world is going to be orders of magnitude bigger than the real world, but it's not going to. It's really not in competition. It's all additive. So, I use this example to be provocative. Like, digital beer is going to be better than real beer. And I use it provocative because it's really hard to imagine what the hell does a digital beer even mean, right? But if you get more utility out of this digital beer than a real beer, well, now what's interesting is that there's no cost to make or distribute the digital beer. So all of spending and consumption, however, is going to go to that digital beer. But the creation of that digital beer doesn't have any impact on how many real beers that we have. Like the real beer consumption is based on how much it costs to make and distribute, beer in the real world, which is very, very costly. So I think that's if you want to extrapolate that, across everything, it's everybody's real world is going to continue to get better the way that it has. It's just that most of what we care about is going to be in the virtual world.
You do think that first part is true, that everybody's real world experience is going to continue to get better just as it has?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I see no reason. Yeah. A lot of like to take travel or something like that. First thing that's going to happen is that everybody can go to Paris virtually, right? But I don't. Is that going to undermine people's desire to go to Paris? No, I think. If anything, it's going to increase awareness. If more people are going to want to go to Paris, there's still going to be, and so there'll be a marginal increase, but we still have to figure out how to, get airplanes to be more efficient and less costly if we're going to want to have more people go visit Paris. So, and I think that'll happen. So yeah, I think that, remember that a lot of these science fictions are intentionally dystopian. If we let Mark Zuckerberg decide what's going to happen, it'd probably be like Ready Player One, right? One person controls everything and it's a disaster. But we have a choice. We can do something different.
Yeah. Oh, well, let me ask you about this because you mentioned him a few times. So I view Mark's, I watched his presentation on the metaverse, and it is seemingly to me, the attitude he has is we want to build the tools. They want to build the hardware and the software tools that people can use to build in the metaverse. Do you feel like they are potentially a bigger harm to the evolution of the metaverse than a help? Because it seems like we need computational, high computationally powerful hardware, AR, VR glasses. Like the iPhone, it feels like Apple's biggest product could still be in the future if they develop amazing AR and VR technology. How do you see it? Do you not see these large companies and these huge teams as necessary in building out hardware, software platforms?
Yeah, no, look, I guess I want to distinguish between like his ultimate goal for doing this and, as we're saying, like some of the concrete steps that he's making. And so, I mean, probably, the investment in the goggles, whatever, is definitely accelerating, that aspect. And then that is going to play a role in getting adoption sooner for immersive worlds and things like that. But I mean, it really is like, what's his true purpose? I'll give you like two concrete examples about Meta in particular. First of all, if they stranglehold the Oculus store, there's only 300 games. So if you want to make a game, you can't get it in the Oculus store. So like, that's horrible, right? I mean, it should be 1,000 flowers bloom right now. And then similarly, like one of the things I think is going to be one of the most interesting applications in VR will be like social experiences. I mean, like this podcast would be even better if we were in a virtual world together, walking around the stream and like,
it'd be so cool.
And yeah, right. That'd be awesome, right? But he's prevented that by it costs 50 cents, 50% tax if you use they only have one of these kinds of experiences that they control, and there's a 50% tax if you do it. They have a 30% tax for doing any economic transaction within their app store, and they add an additional 20% for things that happen in this one app, which is one of the best apps for walking around. So the what they're doing right now, on the technology front, maybe that's going to ultimately get opened up, but like right now, it's like they're I wouldn't say they're harming the future. I just think that they're a lot less relevant than they ought to be because of they're holding themselves back
right.
with these kinds of things.
Specifically on the currency model side. So instead of taking a more decentralized quote unquote open approach to the payment methods, they take an Apple approach, which is the walled garden. We control what games are in, we control the revenue flow, we take a 30% tax on everything. It seems like a straight up, this is how Apple does it, this is how we're going to do it. Whereas they could have created a token.
It's a little bit different than that. They've made a lot of mistakes. They've actually, I think they're looking at Xbox even more than Apple. So the original video game distribution model was subsidize the development of the platform and give people cheap computers to run games, and then restrict the games that are on it so you can charge a higher price. That's how Xbox works and continues to work, and that's the model. So there are like two generations, like this is the Dick Cheney model, right? And then from the first administration, and then the Dick Cheney from the Bush is the free to play, right? And they're not even doing that, because the reason that apps are free is partly because of their decision to make it $100 a year for developers to have an account and no cost for listing. And so there was a race to the bottom, with apps. Now it's turned out that that's created a lot of creativity, and there's an app for that, and all that stuff. So that's the next generation. But yeah, they're not. And then whether it's the cryptocurrency stuff that they've messed up, or what we're talking about here, it's like they're I think they're just really looking at too much, like how is this going to be, like, if this works, this is going to be like so awesome for us. And they're not thinking, what do players want? Like, what do what are people like? They're not like, if there were a big company that disappeared tomorrow that you wouldn't care about, it's like, how would your life be different if Meta disappeared? You wouldn't care, right? Nobody cares. In fact, some people would be happy. Like, it has so much negative, will towards that, towards that company. I mean, compare it to Apple, right? Like, if you lose your iPhone, it's like, do not pass go, cancel all your meetings, go to the Apple store and buy another phone. Like, you like literally, you won't even go to the bathroom. You're going to go and get another phone, right? Really different than how people think about like Facebook and Instagram and so on.
Yeah. Well, Instagram, I'd say the impact to people is tremendously varied. Because some people make a livelihood on Instagram, and it's like where they spend all their time all day long. Mm-hmm. Some people don't check it at all. Whereas almost everyone has a smartphone, and whether it's Android or Apple, is one of the two, or something else. But your point, still very valid. I'm curious to ask more about you. So you run Pocket of Quarters, which I'm sure you think about all these questions all the time. You also are a partner at a VC firm, Rostrum Capital. Is that right? How do you split your time percentage wise?
Oh, I'm basically 100% of Pocketful of Quarters. So what Rostrum, so I manage the existing portfolio, which doesn't take that much time, but that was investing in early, it was raising a second fund to invest in blockchain technologies, and that all got put on sort of hold when Pocketful of Quarters took off.
Mm. And before you jumped into that, were you doing that full time for years, investing? Yeah,
and I was also a partner in a small hedge fund.
I'm curious to hear your story here because. I've done some investing. People ask me about the life on the other side of the table, investing in companies. Oftentimes when people jump into becoming an investor, especially later in their career after they had successful companies, they tend to just do that for the rest of their career, build a fund, raise multiple funds within their fund or their firm. Did you feel like that was your trajectory at some point, and then just you became captivated by this concept, or had you been on the other side of the spectrum where you're looking to jump back in to start a company and this was the perfect opportunity? How did you think about that?
I was not looking to jump back in at all. I was in fundraising mode for the next fund. So it was totally unexpected. And in fact, I mean, my biggest regret was that I got so starry-eyed. I got so like when I was in the beginning, when it was like a cute side project, I was like, well, this is kind of interesting because you can figure out what the picks and shovels are. If you actually try and do something, you can figure out what the landscape is. And so then when Janty was working for us and said he wanted to spin out and do something, like, I was like, I don't have time to think about that investment. I didn't, it was a $2 million valuation. So,
Polygon?
$100,000 Polygon. Yeah. So $100,000 investment would be worth somewhere between 500 million and $1 billion today. So,
well, good thing you didn't do that. Otherwise, you might not be working on Pocketful of Quarters.
maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. You can throw all the wins up you want, right? Like there's not. It's not an either or. So, but my point being that I got so blinded because of all of the positive response that like the original purpose of having a side project or helping with it totally pushed to the wayside. And I think that generally I would say that, entrepreneurship is the worst thing you can do. And the only reason to do it is if it's like you rule out all the other options. Like you can't find a company that like does the thing that you want to do and help them. Like it's always like a better risk reward than starting your own thing. And then, but when something happens like this, that there's no choice, then you get pulled into it. I think those are the best stories about companies. I mean, I know with Y Combinator and things like that, there's a little bit more magic in terms of like our alchemy. You can repeatable process for creating a company, but I think mostly this is for most people this is a better way to think about it.
So you had, my understanding is you had your son's story, which his interviews were popular. You hired a great first developer, which I'm sure kickstarted a lot of the basic infrastructure you have. Was there something else that led you to have the conviction to jump in, or was it those two things and realizing hey, all of a sudden this is going to be a life changing direction? Had you personally been very interested in gaming or crypto previously, or was there something else? Or I'm so curious when people make big life changes like that, what you need to make that change. When did you feel like, okay, that's enough? I've seen enough. I'm going to stop investing, leave the fund, and go and bam, kick ass and Pocketful of Quarters.
Yeah, it was. I think it was the viral moment when
Yeah.
Because the thing is, I don't have a gaming background, although I did actually program computer games in high school and in college, and like thought I was never involved in the industry, but I actually liked that even more than playing games. When I was a kid, I created from scratch with a friend. I created what we call like an Ultima online creator, like a game, like a kit for people to make games with, when I was in high school. So like I care about games, but I don't know the game industry. And then when George did that and he had the player focus, and then the game industry reached out, and then I guess there was a couple of like moments, but when the game industry reached out, it was really interesting because I have connections in the game industry, and I took George to go meet some senior, game executives. And when it was just the two of us going in, there was like the antibodies kicked in. A lot of the things you're saying, it's like, whatever, like stupid kid idea, I have a piece of candy on the way out. And I'm like, it didn't, but then when we go into the games and we had the game executives with us, and then now they're worried about, crypto and blockchain is the future, and they're worried about, what side they're going to be on it. Like it was really different.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think those were some of the things. I did have, as I said, this hedge fund. I had a little bit of a hedge in the beginning, like the first 9 months, but actually, that was one of the telltale signs. Like I couldn't figure out how to get out of that. Like I wanted to get out of that and spend more time. And part of the reason I think we probably got delayed a bit because I was splitting my time, in the beginning. So maybe that's part of the story. It's like when I was really getting frustrated that, that these things might pass by because I wasn't able to spend full time. That was part of the decision to, to keep jumping in. But, I am an entrepreneur at heart, and I knew about crypto from 2011. I've been not actively, but always passively, like I knew it was the future, but I didn't know exactly what to do. Investing it's kind of like a placeholder. Like I want to get involved. I want to figure out how to insert myself into this story that's going. And then obviously creating a company with a real need is the best way to do that.
Yeah. And were you largely investing money that you had made from your previous companies and EndlessTV and the People? Or was it, did you guys raise fund? Okay.
The People's nonprofit. Yeah. So, yeah. But yes. Yeah.
And did you raise outside funding?
What's that? Yeah. A bit past the hat, it was exploratory. I think that raising a real fund is like a 7, 10, 15-year commitment. So there was a little bit of like, hey, do I like this? Am I going to be good at this? So it was that I would describe it like that.
Yeah, I think raising a real fund, it's probably a bigger commitment than it is starting a company and raising money, because you can't just, it's actually ironically easier to shut a company down, return capital, or just shut down period, than it is to shut down a VC firm and give back money in the firm, or, I guess you could
give them the shares or something.
Yeah, could do that, but man, it seems like it's people I've seen that, if I have friends who run firms and they, I can only name like a couple that have left or shut down the firm entirely, but it just rarely really happens.
They turn to zombies.
Yeah. Anything else you want to throw out there? Are you actively writing or tweeting, or is there any authors or people you want to shout out that have been influential to you through your learning experience?
That's a great question. I do tweet a bit. So I'm at Weiks, Weiks. I like to think that I have a lot of insightful things that are there, but I'm not like like a shit poster, so like, I've got thousands of people that follow me, but not millions of, people that follow me. And, It's a great question. Maybe you could be more specific, I guess, in terms of. I mean, you're like asking like, what's my information diet? I mean, I guess
Sure.
the most interesting stuff I get comes from, some private signal groups, that I'm in. The people that I follow on Twitter are really good too, but but that's those are the main places that I get information.
Is that signal groups of friends of yours talking about the gaming crypto world specifically?
It's a mostly a crypto focused group. I don't know any good. Look, the crypto gaming is like essentially bullshit. So there's nobody who calls himself crypto gaming that I probably want to talk to. Play to earn is not really game; it's another form of speculation. And so, the people that are the people who are doing that are basically disingenuous, trying to make money fast, right? And that's not the kind of people I'm interested in. I think there are a lot of people in crypto who are trying to build real things, and so that's like the kind of crypto group that I join. I'd love to be in more game industry stuff. I basically rely on my team's connections and conferences and things like that for for my game stuff. And frankly, that's really one of the most fun parts of the job is that I've got dozens of calls with game developers every week, opening their eyes to the possibilities of interoperability, because the game developers are incredibly creative. And I had one, the iDream Sky is a public company in China that wants to launch some games with our platform, and they said, this is like Angry Birds or Fruit Ninja. These were simple games that utilize the new possibilities of the Apple API. And he's like, look at all these games that we could create just around your API that was never possible before. And I love that. And that, like, sparking that kind of creativity is really great. It's not, and it's people come up with ideas that didn't exist before. Nobody is writing about them because they don't really exist yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it, man. It feels like you're on the real frontier of this. It's like merging the world of gaming and crypto to make it much more interoperable. And you guys are on the tip of the spear of pushing us forward. So congrats on all the progress. Hope you guys keep crushing it. I really enjoyed talking to you, Mike. And we'll include show notes for the video of your son and the white paper and anything else you send over. So.
All right. Thank you.
I'll let you run, man. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure. Thank you.